There's a war happening right now. Not a metaphorical war, not a Cold War, a real one, with real missiles, real bodies, and real consequences that reach into your life whether you know it or not. And most people have absolutely no idea how close to the edge we already are. Let me start with a question most people are afraid to ask out loud. What the hell are the United States doing in the Middle East? Seriously, what's the plan? Because over the last 40 years, America has spent more than $8 trillion on wars in this region. That's not a typo. Trillion. For context, the entire Russian economy is worth about $2 trillion. So the United States poured the equivalent of 4 Russian economies into the Middle East. And what did they get back? ISIS, chaos, regional hatred, and expensive gas bills. Great trade. But before we get to today, let's figure out who Iran actually is. Because most people only see the cartoon version. Angry ayatollahs, death to America chants, underground nuclear centrifuges. And yes, all of that exists. But that's not the full picture. Iran is a civilization 3,000 years old. The Persian Empire was already ancient when Rome was still a village. This is a country of 90 million people, with some of the highest literacy rates in the region, world-class universities, poetry that has shaped global literature, and cinema that wins prizes at Cannes. And here's something that drives Iranians absolutely insane. Iranians are not Arabs, they're Persian. And if you call them Arab, you will not be forgiven. So how did a country with 3,000 years of civilization end up with ayatollahs screaming about death to the West? The answer is simple, and it lives in 1953. In 1953, Iran had a perfectly legitimate, democratically elected prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh, a reformer, a Democrat. He decided to do something straightforward: nationalize Iran's oil. His logic was simple. Iranian oil comes from Iranian soil, so it should belong to Iranians, not to the British Petroleum Company. And that's when everything fell apart. The CIA and British intelligence MI6 organized a coup. The operation was called Ajax. Mossadegh was arrested. A loyal, obedient Shah was installed, and the oil started flowing west again. Happy ending? For the West, for about 25 years. Then came 1979, the Iranian Revolution. Everything that had been boiling under the surface, rage over the 1953 coup, hatred for the puppet Shah, decades of humiliation, exploded. Ayatollah Khomeini flew back from exile in Paris and within months turned the country into an Islamic republic. And then Iranian students stormed the American embassy and held 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days, live on television. From that moment, the United States and Iran became official enemies, and they've never stopped being enemies since. Here's something interesting though. Iran has never once in its 3,000-year history started a war with another state. Not once. Other countries have invaded Iran many times, but Tehran has never fired the first shot. That doesn't make the Ayatollahs angels. They fund Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They support authoritarian regimes across the region. They assassinate dissidents abroad. The picture is complicated, and anyone who tells you it's simple either isn't paying attention or has an agenda. Now, Israel. And here I need you to put down whatever you think you already know, because Israel might be the most misunderstood country on earth, simultaneously from 2 completely opposite directions. Israel is a country the size of New Jersey, 9 million people, no oil, almost no strategic depth, surrounded by states, some of which officially deny its right to exist, and yet one of the most technologically advanced nations on the planet, the 8th most capable military force in the world, a nuclear arsenal that officially doesn't exist, but everyone knows is there, and an ally, the United States, that has given Israel more military aid than any other country in history, around $300 billion over 50 years. Why is America so attached to Israel? Part of the answer is ideological. Israel is positioned as the only democracy in the Middle East, which is at least partially true. Part is strategic, a military foothold in an unstable region, and part is political. The Israel lobby, AIPAC, is one of the most powerful lobbying forces in American politics. No serious American politician can afford to openly oppose Israel. Literally, not one. Now, Iran wants a nuclear weapon, or performs wanting one, which from a policy standpoint is essentially the same thing. Iran's official position: we're developing peaceful nuclear energy. The actual reality: Iran's uranium enrichment level has reached 84%. Weapons grade requires 90%. This is what experts call one step from the bomb. Israel said something very clearly already back in the 1990s. Iran with a nuclear bomb is a red line. Not a warning, a red line. The destruction of Israel is written into the official rhetoric rhetoric of Iranian leadership. Wipe it off the map. That's a direct Khamenei quote. You can debate whether that's genuine intent or political theater, but when a country with that kind of rhetoric approaches nuclear capability, Israel is not interested in finding out the. And then, in April 2024, something happened that had never happened before in history. Iran directly attacked Israeli territory for the first time ever. 331 drones, 110 ballistic missiles, and 36 cruise missiles, simultaneously. The night sky over Israel looked like a scene from a science fiction blockbuster. The Iron Dome, American and British aircraft, and even the Jordanian military together intercepted more than 99% of everything launched. Damage was minimal. Iran said, "We warned in advance." This was a signal, not an attack. Israel said, "This was an attack." The United States said, "We helped defend, but we're not going further." And all three sides gave the world three completely different versions of the same event. This is the Middle East. Here, reality is whatever you can convince the world to accept as reality. But here's what almost nobody talks about in the news. Israel hasn't just been defending itself. For the past 15 years, Israel has been running a covert war against Iran, a real one, with assassinations, explosions, and cyber warfare. This is not a conspiracy theory, it's documented fact. Operation Olympic Games, 2010. The United States and Israel jointly built a computer virus called Stuxnet. This virus infiltrated Iranian uranium enrichment centrifuges and made them physically destroy themselves. Iranian scientists watched their equipment fail and couldn't understand why. All their monitoring data showed normal readings. It was the first cyber attack in history to cause real physical destruction. Iran's nuclear program was set back by years. That was just the beginning. 5 Iranian nuclear scientists were officially confirmed killed between 2010 and 2020. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, Iran's chief nuclear scientist, the man the West called the father of the Iranian bomb, was killed in November 2020, remotely, by a machine gun with remote control, built into a truck parked on an Iranian highway. No live shooter at the scene. This sounds like a Mission Impossible screenplay. It happened on a road outside Tehran. Iran blamed Israel. Israel neither confirmed nor denied. That's standard Israeli practice. They call it the policy of ambiguity. In January 2024, bombings in Iran on the anniversary of Soleimani's assassination killed more than 90 people. In April 2024, an Israeli strike destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, effectively Iran's military headquarters in Syria. That's no longer a covert war. That's an open challenge. Iran responded with the drone and missile strike. Israel responded to the response. The world held its breath, and both times, both sides chose not to escalate further. Why? Because both sides know exactly how it ends, and neither wants to go there. Now, the United States in this story is a fascinating character. On one hand, Israel's primary ally, funding it, arming it, covering it at the UN Security Council. On the other hand, Washington has understood for a long time that a full war with Iran is a catastrophe. Not because Iran is unbeatable. American forces would demolish the Iranian military in weeks. The problem is what comes after. This is what analysts call the Iraq scenario on steroids. Iraq, a country of 40 million, turned into a permanent chaos after the American invasion that cost trillions and thousands of lives. Iran is 90 million people, mountainous terrain, a fanatically motivated population, and 1,000 kilometers of strategic coastline along the Persian Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20% of the world's oil supply. If Iran closes that strait, oil prices double within days. The global economy feels it within a week. Your grocery bill feels it within a month. And that's the real horror of the situation. Israel cannot allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. The United States doesn't want another war. Iran has no intention of surrendering. And all three sides know that one wrong move triggers a chain reaction that nobody can stop. But almost nobody talks about what's happening inside Iran itself. And this is crucial. By most estimates, between 60 and 70% of the Iranian population, especially urban youth, despises the Ayatollah regime. After the murder of Mahsa Amini in 2022, a 22-year-old woman detained by the morality police for wearing her hijab incorrectly, the country erupted. Woman, life, freedom. That slogan went around the entire world. The regime crushed the protests with force. Over 500 people killed, thousands arrested, several executed. But what happened on those streets in Tehran, Mashhad, and Isfahan wasn't just a protest, it was a signal. The Ayatollah's power runs on fear, not support, and the regime knows it. That That's why they need an external threat. Israel and the United States aren't just enemies in Iranian propaganda, they're a tool. As long as there's an enemy outside, you can suppress enemies inside. This rule has worked for every authoritarian regime in history. It's working right now. Separate story, Hezbollah, Iran's Lebanese proxy, built, armed, and financed since 1982. Today, Hezbollah is not just a terrorist organization, it's a state within a state, a force of between 50,000 and 100,000 fighters, a rocket arsenal of over 150,000 projectiles. For comparison, most European countries have fewer missiles than Hezbollah. This was Iran's hand, permanently pointed at Israel's head from the north. In the fall of 2024, Israel effectively decapitated Hezbollah in a matter of weeks. Nasrallah, the organization's long-standing leader, the symbol of the axis of resistance, eliminated. Most of the senior command eliminated. The pager and walkie-talkie bombings, an operation that military academies will study for decades, paralyzed the organization's entire communication structure from the inside. Iran lost its primary strategic deterrence tool on Israel's northern border. This was a devastating blow, not just to Hezbollah, it will rebuild, but to the entire Iranian deterrence strategy that took decades to construct. The whole point of Hezbollah was to threaten Israel so severely that any attack on Iran would mean an immediate counterattack on Israeli cities. That lever is now broken, at least temporarily. So the question now, being asked simultaneously in Tehran, Washington, and Tel Aviv, what comes next? Iran has lost Hezbollah as a deterrence weapon. Its nuclear program is under threat of Israeli strikes. Domestically, there's economic collapse, crushing sanctions, and a youth population that hates the regime. The Ayatollahs have three options. Option 1, accelerate the nuclear program and get the bomb as fast as possible. A nuclear weapon is the only real guarantee that Israel and the United States won't attempt to destroy the regime entirely. Nobody bombs a nuclear state. It works. North Korea proved it. Option 2, negotiate. Return to the JCPOA nuclear deal that Trump tore up in 2018. Get sanctions relief, buy some economic breathing room. Iranian reformists, and they exist, want exactly this. Option 3, proxy war on all fronts simultaneously. Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah rebuilding, Iraqi Shia militias, all Iranian instruments. Expensive, slow, but allows avoiding direct confrontation. Right now, Iran appears to be attempting all three simultaneously, and that itself is a sign that Tehran doesn't have a unified strategy. The United States under Trump is a completely different situation than under Biden. Biden tried to restore the nuclear deal. Trump is a maximum pressure guy. Maximum pressure campaign. That was the official name of his first-term Iran policy. Sanctions, threats, the assassination of Soleimani in January 2020, an unprecedented step that nearly started a war. Iran responded by striking American bases in Iraq. Dozens of American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries. Tehran called it a slap in the face. Washington called it minor injuries. And both sides decided not to go further. But in his second term, Trump is back with a team of people who don't just support pressure on Iran. Some of them openly advocate regime change. That's a different conversation entirely. Israel under Netanyahu is its own story. Netanyahu is a political survivor like few in modern history. He faces criminal corruption charges. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis were on the streets demanding judicial reform. The Gaza war gave him political cover. The Hezbollah war gave him more. The longer the war continues, the longer Netanyahu stays in power. The longer he stays in power, the longer he stays out of court. Cynical logic, but it explains a great deal. And here we arrive at the central question of this entire video. The world right now is watching a triangle where all three sides are drifting toward a collision that all three sides officially don't want. Iran can't afford a war with America. Economically, the country is barely surviving sanctions. Israel doesn't want a major war. Even winning means decades of instability. The United States doesn't want another Middle East war. Too expensive, too unpredictable, too damaging. But not wanting war and preventing it are two very different things, because there's a factor none of the three sides controls: accident. One plane shot down from the wrong country, one radar signal misread, one regional commander who made a decision without asking Tehran first, one missile that hit the wrong target. The history of the last 100 years shows that most wars didn't start because anyone wanted war. They started because a chain of accidents and bad bad decisions went one step too far. World War I, the assassination of an archduke by a man who had already missed his chance and was walking away. The Tonkin Gulf incident, Vietnamese torpedo boats that possibly never existed. A war that killed 58,000 Americans and millions of Vietnamese started from something that may not have happened at all. Now look at today's Middle East. The forces of 6 different nations simultaneously operating inside Syria. Israeli aircraft striking targets inside Iran. Iranian drones flying through Iraqi and Syrian airspace. Houthis attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea. American military bases absorbing regular strikes from Iraqi proxy groups. All of this within a radius of a few hundred kilometers in a region where every side has a defined red line, and beyond that line, nobody stops. This is the most geopolitically dangerous place on Earth right now. Not Ukraine, not the Taiwan Strait, the Middle East. Because the shooting has already started. People are already dying, and we've already been one bad decision away from a large-scale war multiple times in the last 18 months. I'm not telling you which side to root for in this conflict. Honestly, rooting for a side is a strange idea here, because in this story, like in most real stories, nobody is entirely right. There are fears, there are interests, there are generational traumas, there are political calculations, and all of them are pointing in the same direction. One last thing I want to say, something almost never mentioned in the context of this conflict: Iranian youth. 60% of Iran's population is under 30 years old. They grew up under the Ayatollahs. They wore hijabs by force. They watched the internet get shut down every time they went into the streets. They transfer money through cryptocurrency because Iran's banking system is cut off from the world. They watch Netflix through VPNs. They listen to Western music in secret. They study English. They want to live in a normal country. These people are not enemies of Israel. They're not enemies of America. They are enemies of their own regime, and the regime knows it. So it keeps them on a short leash of fear and simultaneously feeds them a narrative that outside enemies want to destroy Iran. As long as that narrative works, the Ayatollahs keep power. Here's the real irony. The more aggressively Israel and the United States pressure Iran militarily and economically, the more they help the Ayatollahs hold on to power. Because an external enemy is the best glue for any weakening regime. And until one of the 3 sides finds a way out of this logic, the spiral continues, while the rest of the world watches and hopes that next time, once again, it somehow doesn't go all the way. Thanks for watching this to the end. If you want to understand what's happening in Gaza, that's a separate video. It's right here. See you next time.